At 3:17 a.m., the hammer struck hollow wood, not stone. A wall that wasn't supposed to be there had a pulse. The night watchman said the echo came from beneath the east wing, where the architect's records ended. Restoration of Monticello had begun as a patriotic gesture, an effort to immortalize the Sage of Liberty. But as the Depression dragged on, the workers swore the house breathed. Paint peeled overnight and old blueprints refused to align. When the youngest laborer, Nathaniel Brooks, pushed his hand through a crack, he felt fabric, soft, ancient, and warm as skin. He screamed. By dawn, they'd pried open the false wall and uncovered a narrow doorway. The air smelled of iron and milk. Dust fell in thin, rhythmic breaths. Inside, a bed pressed into clay, a comb, and a child's tooth wrapped in silk. The foreman called it a servant's quarter. The historian called it impossible, because according to Jefferson's own architectural drawings, that room didn't exist, and yet the hinges were worn, the sheets indented, as if someone had just risen to leave. The chamber was 6 feet by 8. No window, no hearth, just the faint outline of a cross etched above the headboard, scratched into plaster, not hung. When the restorers carried in light, the shadows refused to move. The air seemed to hold sound differently here, like a held breath. Nathaniel swore he heard a heartbeat echoing through the floorboards. Dr. Helen Monroe, head historian from the Virginia Society for Antiquity, documented everything. Her notes were exact, clinical, until they reached the 3rd page. Then her handwriting faltered. The room feels remembered, as though I am trespassing in someone's private grief. Hidden inside a false panel beneath the bed, she found a folded scrap of parchment. One line was legible. He calls me a servant in daylight, but at night I am his nation's sin. Helen didn't sleep that night. She said she could hear whispering in the pipes, a rhythm like lullabies sung through water. By morning she'd sealed the room again, labeling it archival hazard. But Nathaniel returned after hours. He wasn't done. Something in that silence called his name, not his exactly, but a name that wanted a voice again. The journal was found behind a drawer in Jefferson's old writing desk, the ink almost dissolved by humidity. Its handwriting wasn't his. It began without greeting. He says my name only in the dark. When he speaks it, I am divided, woman and property, lover and wound. The writer described a room hidden from visitors, where the walls sweat in summer and freeze in judgment. There were passages about childbirth, whispered, urgent, terrified, and of children not to be named. But the final entry turned the historian's stomach. He told me freedom is a word, not a promise. That even our children belong to history, not to me. Helen realized it was signed only with initials. S.H. Sally Hemings. She stared at the ink until her reflection warped in the glass. What chilled her most wasn't the words. It was that the handwriting looked rushed, written while someone was listening. The paper smelled faintly of copper and smoke, and beneath it, pressed flat, a lock of child's hair, blonde and brittle. Archival reports say Hemings' quarters were adjacent to Jefferson's chambers. But this room wasn't. It was below, hidden inside a structural void, no window, no record. In this confined space, the story of America inverted itself, the founder of freedom keeping freedom's mirror chained beneath his feet. She bore 6 children. 4 lived. All passed as white, all vanished into history with new names. Their descendants might still walk among us, unknowing. But what haunted Helen wasn't the injustice. It was the intimacy, the silence that wrapped love and domination in the same trembling breath. She wrote in her second field report, "If the walls could speak, they would whisper that America was conceived not in liberty, but in secrecy." On the 3rd night, workers found her standing barefoot in the room. She'd drawn the same cross into the dust with her finger, When asked why, she said softly, "It's not a cross. It's a door." Nathaniel began having dreams and of running feet through wooden halls, of children who never aged, of lullabies sung in reverse. In one dream, he saw Jefferson's study burning, but only one flame moved, tracing words into the air. "We are the rooms beneath your history." He woke with soil under his nails, the same reddish clay from the sealed room. Helen recorded changes in temperature each night, dropping precisely 12 degrees at 3:17 a.m., the same hour they'd first uncovered the doorway. Her last entry before she vanished read, "The house doesn't want to forget. It's the remembering that kills us." The Monticello board quietly closed the restoration project in 1937. Official cause: structural instability. Unofficially, the eastern wing was walled again, brick by brick, until no trace of the hidden room remained. But even now, caretakers say that sometimes late at night the temperature drops, and from beneath the floorboards a single word rises, warm as breath: Mother. When the restoration team returned to Monticello on April 4th, Dr. Helen Monroe was gone. Her car sat parked outside, keys still in the ignition, her field kit open on the front seat, camera, scalpel, and a half-developed photograph. In the photo, a narrow bed and something faint in the corner, like a woman's outline folding back into the wall. The board classified her disappearance as personal distress. Newspapers printed nothing. But Nathaniel found her final note wedged between the floorboards of the East Hall. "I have touched the boundary between history and confession. It is not made of stone." For months afterward, Nathaniel claimed to hear her voice when he walked near the foundation, not in words and in breathing, like someone exhaling just behind his ear. One worker quit after witnessing footprints appear in fresh plaster, small, barefoot and wet as if just washed. A month later, a letter arrived at Nathaniel's boarding house. No return address, just his name, written in the same looping script from Sally Hemings' journal. The children never left. They were taught to forget. To survive, they learned to build walls instead of names. Nathaniel brought the letter to Professor Ezra Lowen, a historian studying racial lineage in early Virginia. Lowen dismissed it as romantic fabrication until he noticed the paper's watermark, Monticello's own handmade parchment. Discontinued in 1826, Lowen began cross-referencing census data. Names vanished, reappeared, reclassified. By 1870, one of Jefferson's supposed domestic servants in Richmond matched the age and features of a Hemings child. He wrote in his journal, "The bloodline survives." The silence was inherited. 3 days later, his study caught fire. The flames began inside the locked filing cabinet. The fire department ruled it electrical. But the cabinet wasn't wired. Inside the ashes, a single unburned page. A sketch of a door drawn in charcoal. At its center, a faint inscription, S.H. After Lowen's death, the estate passed into the hands of a preservation committee. They installed early recording equipment to document structural acoustics. The tapes captured creaks, temperature shifts, and something else. At 3:17 a.m., the same hour the room had first been opened, a low voice emerged through the static, not quite speech and more rhythm. Repeated 3 times. "Remember me." Technicians thought it was interference. But every microphone, even those powered off, recorded the phrase simultaneously. When played backward, the words reversed perfectly, like breath inhaled instead of exhaled. Nathaniel listened alone one night and wept. He said it wasn't a ghost. It was memory trying to stay alive. Weeks later, he disappeared too. His tools were found neatly arranged beside the sealed wall, his flashlight still burning. A memorandum from the Department of the Interior, discovered decades later, reads, "Cease excavation of Monticello East substructures. Classified under Cultural Integrity Clause 14B. It's the same clause used to suppress materials deemed nationally destabilizing. The memo continues. Remove all reference to Monroe, Lowen and Brooks from public record. Property to be reclassified as unsafe for entry. Ensure public narrative remains symbolic of democratic idealism. One agent, anonymously quoted in a later report, confessed, "There was something in that room that made people remember too much." Like the walls taught guilt. Afterward, Monticello became a pilgrimage site again. School tours, flags, portraits of Jefferson glowing in the Virginia sun. No one asked about the sealed door beneath their feet. No one mentioned the strange cold spot that made compasses fail, or how every recording device near the East Wing still cuts out at exactly 3:17 a.m. In 1941, a nurse at a Charlottesville asylum filed a report about a patient who refused to state her name. The woman claimed to be descended from the forgotten children. She had no records, but her handwriting matched Sally Hemings's nearly identically. In her notebook, she drew maps of Monticello from memory, including the hidden room precise down to the dimensions. When asked how she knew, she said, "It remembers for us. The house keeps our stories when we are not allowed to." Her last entry before her death read, "The cross above the bed. It isn't a prayer. It's the mark he left, to remind the world he owned salvation too." She died quietly at 3:17 a.m. The hospital lights flickered out for 9 full seconds. In the morning, her body was gone. Only a folded scrap remained on the pillow, written in faint reddish ink, "Mother." 15 years after the Monticello project was sealed, a janitor at the Library of Congress discovered a mislabeled box. Acoustic Studies, 1938, Monticello Estate. Inside were 3 wax cylinder recordings wrapped in decaying linen. The label on one read only, "For her." Technicians transferred the audio. What emerged wasn't static. It was breathing, slow and rhythmic, followed by a woman's whisper. Her words were fragmented but chillingly clear. "He built liberty above my grave." A historian listening in the booth felt a violent migraine, then began vomiting blood. He insisted he'd heard a child humming beneath the whisper, though no such frequency was registered on the tape. The recordings were immediately reclassified and removed. But before they vanished, one archivist made a single duplicate, a quiet act of defiance. She mailed it anonymously to the University of Virginia, writing only, "If you listen long enough, you'll understand that America has 2 hearts, one beating above ground and one buried." Professor Harold Bellows, a linguist studying phonetic anomalies, received the package. He played the duplicate recording every night, charting tone and frequency. After 2 weeks, he began to notice responses. Each playback altered subtly, pauses shifting, breaths aligning with his own heartbeat. He logged the phenomenon as temporal acoustic memory, but the night he spoke aloud, "Who are you?" the whisper replied. A second voice, younger, broken by sobs, "I'm still here. Don't let them close it again." Bellows stopped sleeping. His office windows frosted from inside. In his final letter to the dean, he wrote, "Language is not learned. It's remembered. The first tongue of this nation is silence, and it still speaks." A federal archaeologist named Miriam Colfax quietly reopened the site in late autumn 1955 under the pretense of structural maintenance. Beneath the east foundation, she found layers of mismatched brick, newer ones concealing older hand-carved stone. She spent weeks carefully removing debris until she reached something blackened and fused, like clay mixed with bone. Inside the residue were traces of textile fibers, 19th century cotton, human hair, and calcium deposits consistent with breast milk. Her notes turned erratic. "The material is organic. The wall was fed." 2 nights later, she called her supervisor in tears, whispering, "There's still warmth in it." Her report was confiscated. The site was filled with fresh concrete and declared unsafe. Colfax was reassigned to Arizona, where she suffered a nervous collapse and refused to enter any building with brick walls again. Rumors of Monticello's archaeological contamination reached Washington. A closed-door hearing was held under the pretext of preserving national dignity. One transcript survived. Question: do you believe the hidden room was genuine? Colfax's answer: the room was never hidden. We were. When pressed to clarify, she replied, the structure feeds on memory. It keeps rewriting those who find it. I saw her, the woman in the walls. Not ghost, not spirit, just someone who remembers too much. After her testimony, the hearing was adjourned. Records were sealed indefinitely. Colfax was institutionalized within the year. When interviewed decades later, she murmured, he promised freedom. He built a womb of silence instead. There is no evidence of any hidden chamber or related phenomena. Monticello remains a proud symbol of American ideals. Photographs of the East Wing vanished from archives. Blueprints were redrawn. The coordinates Bellows had written on his wall now pointed to a flat expanse of earth, grass-grown, featureless, but visitors began reporting strange sensations during tours. Moments of vertigo near the east facade. Children whispering names their parents didn't recognize. A faint lullaby with no clear source. Something old, trembling, tender, sung in a dialect lost before the Civil War. Night guards found handprints appearing in the frost on the inside of glass display cases. Always small, always two, as if a mother and child pressed close together. By 1960, staff quietly stopped scheduling tours after dark. Because when the lights dimmed, guides said, the whole house exhaled him, and for a second, they swore they could smell milk and clay. A graduate researcher cataloging forgotten negatives in a Charlottesville archive found a roll marked HM03. When developed, it revealed the East Wing corridor, newly plastered, empty. Except in one frame a figure stood where no floor should be. A woman's outline, translucent, head bowed, hair bound in a scarf. On the back of the photograph, in faint pencil, taken by H. Monroe, 1937. Helen Monroe, missing 24 years. Under magnification, analysts found another shape in the corner, a small child holding her hand. The emulsion had bubbled where their faces should be, as if light itself refused to remember. That same week, the archivist who handled the negative began speaking in sleep, repeating, she's still cataloging us. In 1962, an elderly woman appeared at a Richmond hospital under the name Ellen M. Her fingerprints matched no record, but her handwriting, sharp, meticulous, matched Helen's journals exactly. She told the attending physician she had been inside the foundation. When asked to explain, she whispered, it teaches you what you built on. Every brick remembers a name. Her blood work showed iron levels 3 times normal. Her skin carried traces of red clay unknown to the region. Before vanishing again, she left a final note on hospital stationery. History is not the past. It's the room we keep sealing, afraid it might start breathing again. Decades later, a civil rights historian uncovered Monroe's suppressed field reports. In the margins, she'd drawn a spiral, each loop labeled with a date from 1801 to 1937. At the center, she wrote one word, now. Her conclusion, the architecture itself is confession. Monticello was built to contain contradiction, freedom above, captivity below. The foundation is literal memory, bone, milk, breath. What we call heritage is a body still trying to wake. When read aloud, the report produced a low hum in the recording microphones, identical to the 1938 heartbeat tape. It wasn't interference. It was resonance. The past and present occupying the same frequency, refusing separation. On July 4, 1976, the bicentennial, tour guides reported the East Wing vibrating during the evening fireworks. Plaster cracked in the shape of a doorway. From inside came a soft sound. Neither cry nor song, but something in between. Security footage, later erased, showed the wallpaper moving as if something beneath pressed gently outward. Witnesses described hearing two voices overlapping. He built liberty above my grave. Remember me. For 9 minutes, every electric bulb in Monticello dimmed to red. Then silence. When the lights returned, the doorway had sealed itself again. Smooth, perfect, as if freshly painted. Today, visitors walk the manicured paths, eyes lifted to the dome gleaming against the Virginia sky. No marker mentions the room. No plaque names the children. Yet some swear that if you stand alone near the East Foundation just before dawn, you can hear breathing, steady, patient, human. Beneath the soil, the hidden chamber remains, a tomb, a cradle, a heartbeat. Helen Monroe's final recovered line, etched into the inside cover of her journal, reads, "America keeps its ghosts not in graveyards but in architecture. Every freedom has a basement. The camera lingers on the bricks. Wind moves through the grass like a whispered lullaby. A heartbeat fades beneath the narration. This is not a haunting. This is remembering.